Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey everybody, Scott Luton with Supply Chain Now, back here at SAPICS Annual Conference 2023 in beautiful Cape Town, South Africa. Joining me for this segment, we have Ken Titmus. Ken, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, Scott. Glad to have you in Cape Town.
Well, you know, and that's the right way of putting it because you've been here for almost 40 years and you haven't missed a conference. 35 conferences,
35
right?
conferences, yeah.
All right, so I'm not sure that there's a wealth of information. We're not going to get to all of it here today. But I want to start with, beyond all those things, I told you about our 2-decade rule we've got at Supply Chain Now. We're going to break that, unfortunately, because Ken, you bring 50 years of operations and supply chain management to the table. That is remarkable. You've been there and seen it all, I bet. So this might be an unfair question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. If you could pick one moment out of that incredible journey, that was one of your favorite, most gratifying moments, what would that be?
I think back in the late 80s, I was working for a company in Cape Town here, and I was a sales manager, and we had a chap come in called Benno Robinson, who was a manufacturing consultant, and he spoke to us about MRP2.
Okay.
And we spent the weekend with him on a course, MRP2, and at the end of the weekend, I put my hand up and said, hey, I want to be the project leader. So that changed my life, I think, and got me involved, because I said to Benno, I know nothing, what do I do? He says, the first thing you do is you join SAPICS, which I did.
Okay.
I said, what's the second thing I do? He said, go to the conference, and that was number 11, and we're now on 45. And I've been to every one. And then he said, get certified, APEX certified, and get involved. And we had a good implementation because of the manufacturing consultant I had and the software we had. I got involved. I became involved in the chapter. We had chapters in Cape Town in those days, and I became the president or the chairman of the Cape Town chapter. Finally got onto the council and the board of directors, and I've been president twice for SAPICS.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a ton of growth for you, Ken, but also a ton of service industry, and I appreciate that. You've had a big impact. Jenny Froome, who I've collaborated with for years,
yes,
you are on her short list of supply chain icons, so just so you know.
She calls me the wizard.
Yes, that's what. I was going to let you say that. I thought I'd remember that nickname. So let's shift gears here. So part of what you just mentioned, you're a well-known, highly regarded professional educator in industry. I want to ask, what is, for all that work you've done, giving back, helping others succeed, helping them learn, grow, and advance, what is your why there?
Well, I started my own business way back in the 90s, and my strategy was not to grow. And I've been very successful, it's still only me. But I've collaborated with other people, and I've tried to develop other people. And I like the sort of byline that SAPICS has come up with recently, which is elevate, educate, and empower. And I think that's what I've been doing over the last 35 years with SAPICS, is trying to elevate people, get them to understand what they should be learning in the education, and then empowering them. At one stage, I was the APEX. APEX has got a very good instructor development program. And I was the instructor development program instructor for Africa.
Wow.
And at one point, we had more APEX instructors in South Africa here than any other country in the world, apart from America. And so I've spent a lot of time developing other people to go out and do what I was doing. And people say, aren't you crazy? You're giving away your business. But I think the more people that are out there doing this, the more business is going to be. So that's been my strategy, is to, as SAPICS says, elevate people, educate, and then empower them to go out and do what I do.
Yeah, industry's better off by taking that approach, right? All right, so I want to, speaking of you as a practitioner, you also as an educator, What is one supply chain principle or best practice that you wish more leaders out there, practitioners, organizations, what you wish they embraced more?
Education, education, education. You know, I go into companies and I speak to the supply chain manager, and he's got no qualifications. And top management really don't understand what's happening in supply chain. You know, they've worked their way up through the ranks and got to this particular level thinking they know everything. You know, what we did 30 years ago worked, so should work today. So I'd like to see a lot more education. I'd like to see top management going out and getting educated in supply chain. We should be seeing these people at our conference here. We tend to get sort of middle management coming in, but top management, very little. So I would say top management getting themselves educated,
right,
and then educating their employees.
Yeah.
And it's out there. I mean, the education's there, but very few people are actually doing it, and it's quite kind of tragic, really.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the main thing I would like to see happening in industry, education.
So business leaders, write those checks, right? Get your people educated so they can digest change better, succeed more effectively, and drive change. Because to your point, we can't continue to try to do things like we did them 30 years ago, right?
It's totally changed.
All right, so let's keep moving forward. So you've called, again, I think I mentioned on the front end, Cape Town has been home for you for about 40 years, right? And you've worked globally across the industry. But what is, as you think about here in Cape Town, South Africa, really across the African continent, right? I think 46 countries make up Africa.
A bit more than that, but
is it more than that?
It's about 50 odd, yeah. It's about the same number of states that you've got in America.
Okay, all right. Well, very close. And the important thing there is it's folks from different walks of life, different preferences, different customs, right? Just like the U.S., you got 50 states, you got different governments, you got different people. You know, it's one of the key themes that's come out of our podcast series with Jenny Froome, you know, where we focused on supply chain leadership across Africa, is you can't look at Africa in a singular fashion. No. You got to really look at it town by town, region by region, country by country, right? Yeah. So when you think of that, all of that, that's quite a backdrop. When you think of all of that, Ken, what is one thing that you wish more folks, what's maybe a two-part question. One of your favorite aspects of this unique supply chain ecosystem across Africa, and then maybe what's one thing that you wish more folks knew about?
I think what I like about Africa is the diversity, and the diversity of the people and the cultures. And we've got some great people in Africa. I've been involved in some implementations through a number of African countries, and we've got some great people out there. We've got a great continent. I reckon Africa should be the next USA, the United States of Africa, okay? We've got that potential. Unfortunately, we're not getting the investment coming in from the rest of the world, and we're not getting that education out there either. And so we have huge potential. We've got the land, we've got the youngest population of any continent on Earth. We've got minerals for Africa. And unfortunately, those minerals are disappearing and being beneficiated by other continents and other countries. So we have huge potential here. And I saw that when I first arrived, and that's why I stayed. I just saw a lot of potential. And we've just got to get our leaderships to come together.
So you're seeing some of it realized, but there's so much more opportunity, right?
Huge opportunities.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. The innovation, the brilliance, the opportunity, all here across Africa. It's been really rewarding to be in a position and to help share some of that out across the globe. So let's bring it back home to the conference. Your 35th SAPICS conference. That is something, Ken. You got to write a book on all those experiences. So so far? So I know we're early on in the 2023 conference, but what's one of your favorite moments so far, inspiring moments, you name it? What's been one of your favorites?
Well, I think the first session that we had this morning on artificial intelligence and machine learning, this is something that's going to improve our supply chains. I'm involved in some software and we're putting a lot of this in. Our software leader there sees, he says the supply chain should be like an aircraft. 90% of the time, the computers are running the aircraft. The pilots only put their hands on the controls when there's a problem or they want to go around a storm. And we should be running our supply chains like that. And I think we're getting to that point where we can start applying our minds to the problems we have rather than deciding, well, what shall I make today or what shall I buy tomorrow? The computers can organize that. Let's spend our time trying to improve the supply chain and fixing the events that are happening, particularly in our VUCA world, of course.
Our VUCA world. So that's one of my favorite acronyms that came out of, I think, the U.S. military.
It did, yeah.
Right? So help me. Vague?
No, volatile.
Volatile. So VUCA, V-U-C-A, is an acronym that Ken's referring to. Volatile.
Uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. VUCA.
Yeah.
So if you hadn't heard the acronym, you can use it like me every day and try to remember what it stands for, though, unlike me. All right, so Ken, I knew we were just going to be scraping the surface of all that you do and have seen and witnessed and what you're trying to share and educate and help others. So I appreciate the few minutes of time, but I also really appreciate the optimism and all that you see here. If, to your point, if we can get folks to come together, right? That's what's old is new again still, right? So if folks want to tap into all the cool things you're doing, whether in industry as a practitioner or as an educator or as a volunteer leader within the SAPICS community, how can folks connect with you, Ken?
Well, probably email's the best, and that's ktitmus@mweb.co.za. So it's KTITMUSS at mweb.co.za.
Or they can come to the conference, and I'm sure they're going to catch you. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Ken Titmus, such a pleasure. I was looking forward to this because I'd heard so much about you. It's a pleasure to sit down and see it and talk with you firsthand. So thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks, Scott.
All right.
Really enjoyed it.
All right, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed this conversation with Ken as much as I have. This has been a long time in the making. But folks, as we've shared with these other segments, Ken shared so much. I'll start with how he challenged leaders to focus on education, write those checks, and get your team educated so they can prosper through these VUCA times that he also referred to.